The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. Yeah!
Hi, and welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to go over how to maintain a pool using a very limited amount of Tri-Chlor tablets going forward. We're going to have a bit of a crisis here in the industry with probably a shortage of Tri-Chlor tablets going into next season. I'm going to cover some things you can do to kind of extend the chlorine in your pool and use less tablets. Leslie's Pool Supplies is a proud partner of the Pool Guy Podcast Show. Leslie's Pool Supplies has been do-it-yourselfers and pool trade professionals' trusted partner since 1963, providing quality products and services to make pool care easy and solutions and expertise to do it right. So I've been fielding calls from guys in my group about this tablet shortage that we're experiencing now this season. As it's coming to an end, we're not using as many tablets, of course, but there's still a shortage and they're hard to come by. And this kind of gives you a look or a glimpse into next season where you're going to probably have really high prices for tablets and you may have shortages because of the factory fire of the Biolabs factory in Louisiana. I did a full podcast on this a couple weeks ago that covered this crisis that we're going to have with the Tri-Chlor Tablet shortage. And you can refer to that for some more details about that. But there are ways you can actually maintain a pool without using a lot of Tri-Chlor tablets. It's more difficult, of course, because the Tri-Chlor tablets are something that's been a mainstay in the pool industry for many, many years. And I also mentioned in the other podcast that it's really hard to go from using Tri-Chlor tablets to liquid chlorine or cal hypo without some major side effects because of the high cyanuric acid that's produced by using Tri-Chlor tablets. Just to summarize, if you use a 50-pound bucket of Tri-Chlor tablets during one season in a pool, you're going to raise that cyanuric acid level to about 150 parts per million because about half of that bucket of tablets is cyanuric acid. So you're putting in about 25 pounds of cyanuric acid by using a 50-pound bucket of tablets. So this goes to say that with that high cyanuric acid level, using an unstabilized chlorine like liquid chlorine or cal hypo, the problem you're going to have is that since the tablets need to keep the chlorine level at such a high level to be effective, when you switch to liquid or cal hypo, you're not going to have the same effect because you're not releasing chlorine on a slower basis as the tablet dissolves in the pool. What this means to you as a pool service provider and as a homeowner, not so much, you won't have this much of a problem because you can add chlorine to your pool on a daily basis if necessary. But if you're a pool service provider and you have a 20,000 gallon pool, and let's say you're in Texas and the weather's really hot and humid and the water temperature's in the 80s and you're using 3 or 4 tablets a week in this particular pool, how can you go from using 3 or 4 tablets down to using maybe 1 or maybe even none if you can't find any tablets and still maintain that pool? So the difficulty is the high cyanuric acid level that you're going to find in these Tri-Chlor tablet pools, and there's really no way around it. If the pool has cyanuric acid level of 200 parts per million or higher, you're going to probably have to do a partial drain or a full drain. So basically, if you drain half the water out of a pool that has a cyanuric acid level of 200 parts per million, you're going to bring that down to 100 parts per million, which is still on the high side, but you can probably manage 100 parts per million versus 200 or 300 parts per million. So what you're going to have to do in some cases, if you run into a situation where you can't find the tablets, is to drain your pools partially. A lot of customers won't want to do that. And so a second form of attack would be to do things like we used to do in the old days. And I mentioned this in the other podcast too, is that in the 90s, tablets weren't the mainstay. In the late 80s and 90s. It wasn't something that you would use on a regular basis like we are nowadays. And so a lot of times you would just use liquid chlorine and then you would go ahead and keep the cyanuric acid level at 30 to 50 parts per million and you would add liquid chlorine to the pool. There were a lot of liquid chlorine feeders back in the day also, and they kind of lost their share of the market to the tablets, and they're coming back for sure. HASA makes a good chlorine feeder called the Liquidator, and they're probably going to have other feeders coming out for next season for sure because of this shortage of tablets. And I think the liquid chlorine feeders are a good option. And so if you need to install one of these at your account, it's not price prohibitive. It's going to be more expensive than an inline chlorinator for tablets, but I think in the long run it's going to be a much better way to maintain these pools going forward. And so you can install an inline chlorinator in these accounts that really need it. So if you have a 25,000 gallon pool, definitely these inline chlorinators will definitely help in those situations. Now if you have a smaller pool, like in California, in my area, most of the pools are 15,000 gallons or smaller. You can really get away with using liquid chlorine or cal hypo. And if you have the customer help you out during the week, you can really manage it really well. And so basically what you would do, like we used to do in the old days, is you would get a case of liquid chlorine and leave it at your service account. And then you would add chlorine from your truck. And you would tell the customer, if you're there on a Monday, you would tell the customer on Thursday if you can add a gallon of liquid chlorine to the pool, and that way the chlorine will be stable all week long. Now you can get away with adding maybe 2 gallons at the visit, and it may last all through the week depending on the temperature, factors like pool use, but it probably won't in most cases, especially if the cyanuric acid level is above 80 parts per million. You definitely want to leave that case of chlorine there at the pool so the customer can add it for you during the week. They can add a gallon or so during the week for you, and they don't have to take any readings of the pool. You can just kind of guess that, in a 12,000 gallon pool, if you add a gallon when you're there on Monday, that by Thursday you're going to need another gallon of it to get you through the weekend. And so just have them pour it in the pool. Very easy to use. Tell them just be careful not to splash it on your clothing, because it's just like regular bleach in the laundry, and have them pour it in for you. And you can get by with the smaller pools this way with no issues really at all. And then of course you can use a chlorine enhancer, which I highly recommend you use on your route. And so if you're using 2 or 3 tablets in the pool, with a chlorine enhancer, you'll go down to 1 tablet a week, maybe 1.5 tablets a week. And this definitely will help you with the shortage of tablets. And you can use a variety of enhancers. I like adding borates to a pool to bring it to 30 to 50 parts per million. You really don't want to go over 50 parts per million because then you're just wasting product. And it's probably not a good idea to go over 50 anyway. 30 to 50 is all you're going to need with the borates. And the borates will definitely enhance the chlorine and make it last a lot longer in the pool and prevent algae from growing in that pool. So the borates would be a great way to do that. Another very easy method is with the Pool RX. You would just simply drop that in your skimmer or pump basket. And this has a copper mineral, and this will definitely keep the algae out of the pool, which will in turn enhance the chlorine, will free it up to work better. And I found that with a Pool RX in the pool, you're using a lot less chlorine, maybe half or less than half the chlorine you were using before. The only drawback with the Pool RX is it does wear off, so it's not going to last sometimes the whole season. A lot of times it will last the whole season, but they only are rated to last for anywhere from 4 to 6 months. And so you may need a booster or a new Pool RX unit in the pool. But these are a convenient and easy way to extend the chlorine in pools, and I use them on my route also along with the borates. And then the third method is very well proven. In fact, the pool stores have been selling this for a long time without even knowing how effective this was. And this is a combination of using a phosphate remover and an enzyme. And I find that in the pools that I use a phosphate and enzyme in, the chlorine is definitely boosted in those pools. It lasts a lot longer. There's no algae in the pool, and you won't use as many tablets. So there are ways to use less tablets by using one of these enhancers that I mentioned here, and I definitely would recommend doing that. If you have a pool service route, pick 1 or 2 of these and stick with it, and definitely this will help you. And then let me switch gears real quick, and let's talk about the added costs to your service accounts. Now, if you were including tablets in your service, you're probably going to take a big hit because the wholesale cost of the tablets went from $78 or $80 for a 50-pound bucket. Currently at this recording, you could probably get a 50-pound bucket for $120, maybe $130 wholesale. And so the prices have definitely gone up in my area. Every area is different, so you may still get a good deal on your tablets in your area, but chances are the prices are rising. And so this is kind of a preview of next season, where it may not be uncommon to get a 50-pound bucket of tablets for $130, $140, which pretty much doubles the cost of the tablets for you running your business. And you'll have to pass this cost on to your customers. You'll have to give them a letter or a form letting them know that because of the chemical costs increasing, you'll have to raise the service rates by $10 or $15 a month, or whatever you think is fair to cover your added costs. And then of course, if you go to liquid chlorine or cal hypo, it's going to be a much more expensive way to manage your route also. If you buy a case of liquid chlorine, leave it at the customer's house, that case will cost you $16 or $18 depending on your area. If you're in Florida, you guys are lucky down there. Your chlorine's really inexpensive, and you can leave a 2-gallon. I don't know how you're going to do that with the customers down there, but a 2.5-gallon jug of chlorine, and they can pour some in the pool. Maybe leave them half a jug, and they can pour it in the pool for you. But you're gonna have to figure out something with you guys. Is weird, gigantic chlorine jugs down there in Florida. Here in California, we just have the gallon containers that HASA makes, which is convenient for this kind of thing. But definitely, you're gonna have more cost because you're gonna be buying more liquid chlorine. And of course, the Cal Hypo shock is more expensive, so you're gonna be spending more money on chemical costs. And so you're really not gonna have much choice but to pass these costs on to the customer. The cost of the enhancer in their pool, plus the added cost of using liquid chlorine and Cal Hypo, and of course the cost of the tablets being a lot more expensive. And so you wouldn't be able to sustain that kind of cost and still run your business. Kind of look at it like a gas station. Every gallon of gas, they have a margin. Some gas stations have more of a margin than others. For instance, like an Arco, their margins may be 8 to 10 cents because they have the mini marts in there that make them a lot of money, so they can sell their gas cheaper. They don't need to make a lot of money on their gas. And then like maybe a Chevron or a Union 76 station, their margin is a lot higher because they don't really have that market, and so maybe 20 cents a gallon, and so their gas price is higher. And in that case, for you doing your service route, you're kind of like a gas station where the cost of the fuel is more expensive now, and so you have to pass it on to the customer by raising the price of the gas. And so for you, you're going to raise the price of your service because of the fact that it's costing you more to do that pool service because of the chemical cost. So you can't just charge what you're charging now and think you're going to make money or absorb this, because you won't. And so you're going to have to figure out some way to pass this on to your customers in a nice way, friendly way of saying, the costs have gone up, and so I have to raise my service rates. And they'll understand in most cases that that's the reality of what's happening pretty much in every industry where things kind of go up in cost. And I think it's going to be a common thing going forward in a lot of different industries. So ideally, if you have a large service route with 80 pools, I would hope that you can drain maybe 20 of those successfully, where the customer won't give you too much pushback, at least partially or completely drain those. And then you can use less Tri-Chlor tablets in all the other pools. Go to a liquid chlorine, go to a Cal Hypo, get some kind of chlorine feeder for your accounts. And then if you have customers that have extra money to spend, definitely convert them over to saltwater systems, and that way you don't have to worry about using any tablets at all in the pools. It's just an expensive alternative that most customers won't really go for, but there's an option there for that also. But you can definitely get away with using liquid chlorine every week in your pools on your route without using tablets, as long as the cyanuric acid level is 30 to 50 parts per million. And if you use an enhancer, even better. And in the larger pools, leaving some chemicals there for the customer to add during the week may be a viable option, or the only option you have going forward, depending on the cost of the tablets next season. All of this is speculation. Maybe there's something that will happen where the tablets will be cheap next season, but if they have to import them from China, there's going to be a 45% import tax. And with that factory down that made 2 million pounds of the trichlor, I think you can almost see that the cost of the tablets will be higher next season. And let me go back to the homeowner here. And if you're maintaining your pool using Tri-Chlor tablets, you can definitely switch over to what is known as the Bbb Method. I know they recently changed the name of that, but I still call it that. And that's using common household products to take care of your pool. And so the first B in this method is for bleach, the second B in this method is for baking soda, and the third is for borax. And I don't know exactly the order if I got it correct, but that's how I classify it. And so you would use bleach as your sanitizer, which is the same active ingredient as liquid chlorine. And then you would use baking soda to raise your alkalinity. And then you would use borax to raise your pH. And then if you have to lower your pH in your pool, you would use muriatic acid, dry acid, acid magic, some kind of pH reducer that's on the market in your area to lower the pH. And this is a very successful method of maintaining your pool using liquid chlorine basically, which is the bleach and the Bbb method, and then balancing your pool, taking the readings and making sure that your cyanuric acid level is between 30 50 parts per million. And if you need more help with this particular method, you can go to the Trouble-Free Pool Forum, TFP. They have a forum there, and all they pretty much do is talk about this method of pool care. They have a pool school there that will show you how to do this correctly. And then I guess I should add a few caveats here. One thing you're going to notice if you are doing this method is that you're going to be using a lot of, if you're going to use bleach, you're going to be using a lot of bleach and a lot of liquid chlorine in the summertime, especially if your pool is larger. So don't be alarmed if you're adding actually, a gallon of liquid chlorine every other day in your 25,000 gallon pool or 30,000 gallon pool, because you go through a lot of chlorine in the summertime for various reasons. One, the UV index is higher, the water temperature is hotter, there's more pool use. And so don't think that you're going to switch to this method and you're going to use less chlorine. You're probably going to be using more chlorine, because when you add the tablets, you're adding 2 or 3 tablets, and you just do that for the whole week. With this method, you're going to be adding bleach or liquid chlorine, whenever you're going to need it. So maybe 3 days or 4 days in. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're doing service, you're going to have to leave some chlorine for the customer. But in this case, since you're doing your own pool maintenance, you can add it whenever it needs to be added. And so you'll know your pool pretty well as you're taking care of it. You'll know when the chlorine is getting low by testing it often. And one of the benefits of doing your own pool is, of course, you can test it more often during the week. For us service guys, we were there once a week, and so we're kind of blind the rest of the week of how the pool is going to be. But for you, it's pretty easy because you can take care of it, check the chemistry later in the week if you need to, and then add the liquid chlorine. And I'll harken back to those days when I first started in the service industry, before the tablets were heavily used. You would simply maintain the pools with a good cyanuric acid level and then use liquid chlorine. Or back then, there was a lot of gas chlorine services. I'm not sure what happened to them in California, but I would see them all the time. They would pull up to my account, and then they would inject it with gas chlorine into the water. And this was a really great service for a lot of people. A lot of times, I would just do a chemical only service where I would check the chemicals for them. And they did have this gas chlorine service, but it disappeared in the early 90s. I'm not sure what happened again. And I think that was a really effective way to introduce chlorine to the pool. But I'm guessing because of all the regulations in California, it was probably hard to sustain that kind of business here. And so liquid chlorine was the mainstay for a long time before tablets became heavily used. And tablets are definitely convenient. You just put them in once a week, and you don't have to worry about adding chlorine to your pool. And so my suggestion to you as a homeowner going into next season, I definitely would look into the Bbb method of pool care using liquid chlorine. If your cyanuric acid level is high, definitely do a full or partial drain of your pool, bring that level down to 30 to 50 parts per million, and you can definitely take care of your pool just using liquid chlorine, but no tablets at all. So the method that is propagated on this forum is one that does not use any Tri-Chlor tablets at all, and so there's quite a lot of followers on this forum. I think it's one of the largest pool forums on the internet, and they have quite a lot of members in there. And all of them use this method to take care of their pool. So it can be done. You can take care of your pool without Tri-Chlor tablets. It's just a little bit harder to do as a pool service provider than a homeowner. And so if you go to the pool store next season and the tablets are like, $200 for a 50-pound bucket, you definitely want to do this method, because you're definitely going to save money. Even if you have to add a gallon of liquid chlorine, twice a week, it's still going to add up to a savings over the tablets, and then you don't have to worry about draining your pool because of the high cyanuric acid. So you're going to save money on water costs, and the water is going to be a lot better and safer. The chlorine is going to be much more effective at a lower cyanuric acid level. And then, of course, you can definitely add an enhancer to extend the chlorine use. And then, of course, if you do have the extra money in your budget, I don't see a problem with you going with a saltwater system. They're getting more affordable. They have a really good system. Jandy makes a really affordable system. So does Pentair. Jandy's True Clear, Pentair's iChlor are under $1,000, and so they're pretty affordable, and they're really well-made systems. And I don't have a problem with someone switching over to a saltwater system and having the chlorine being produced in there. And one thing I mentioned earlier is that when you do switch over to liquid chlorine, you're going to find yourself using more of it. And just to give you an idea, a saltwater system, if you have a pretty good size one rated for 30 or 40,000 gallons of water, it should make about a pound of chlorine in 24 hours if you're running it for 24 hours straight. And this is one reason why if you have a saltwater generator, you're not adding any chlorine to your pool, because if you run it for 8 or 10 hours a day, it could make maybe half a pound or a fourth of a pound of chlorine, which is equivalent to about half a gallon or a fourth of a gallon of liquid chlorine in your pool. And so just imagine adding a half a gallon of liquid chlorine every day to your pool. And that's kind of how the saltwater generators work, and that's why it takes all of the effort out of maintaining your pool, and why I really like them, because you don't have to worry about adding chlorine to your pool because it generates it and creates the chlorine as it's operating in your pool. Depending on how long you run it will depend on how much chlorine it makes in your pool. And if you wanted to equate liquid chlorine to a saltwater generator, that's why in a lot of cases you're adding a lot of liquid chlorine to your pool, especially a larger pool, 30,000 gallons or 25,000 gallons. You're going to need to add a lot of liquid chlorine to maintain that chlorine level, especially in the peak of summer. I've had people email me using liquid chlorine saying, I'm adding a gallon of chlorine every day almost to my pool. And then I ask them, how big is your pool? And they say it's 25,000 gallons. And I tell them, that's pretty typical in the summertime. If you had a saltwater system and it was running, it would be adding about that much chlorine to your pool. So I wouldn't necessarily say that using liquid chlorine is a more affordable method depending on your pool size. It is definitely a viable method. It's a method that's going to give you, again, the best water quality because you're going to have less cyanuric acid in your pool, and you're definitely going to have a better, safer pool by using liquid chlorine over tablets. And so this crisis that's being created by the shortage isn't a complete bad thing, because now it kind of opens up the eye to the industry that maybe we're relying too much on these Tri-Chlor tablets, and maybe they're not the best way to maintain a pool. Yes, they're an easy way, they're a convenient way, but again, it may not be the best way to maintain a pool. And I think this is going to show a lot of people that there are alternative ways of taking care of their pool, and there are probably better ways of sanitizing the pool than putting these Tri-Chlor tablets in every week. And if you're a homeowner looking for more resources, you can definitely check out my website, swimmingpoollearning.com. I have a lot of helpful web pages there. I also have a page on the Bbb Method there. And if you do service for a living and you want to enhance your business, definitely check out my coaching program at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. Leslie's Pool Supplies has been do-it-yourselfers and pool trade professionals' trusted partner since 1963, providing quality products and services to make pool care easy and solutions and expertise to do it right.